Atlantis? No, that would be silly. I couldn't help seeing a similarity in an artist's rendering of Atlantis based on Plato's description, the only surviving one we have to go with, as I will for this. But as you know, it's supposed to be a set of concentric circles or rings of land, with oceans or waters in between. There have been searches for it, books written about it, and careers dedicated to it, but as yet we are still waiting to discover its location. And that is where I wonder if we were thinking too small, trying to find it within a landmass or area of ocean. I'll move now to the idea of Antarctica, because it will tie into the overall explanation, and I'm talking about the Earth not being a globe as we know it. Instead, going with the idea of a much bigger globe Earth, the crater theory, and our realm actually being flat and round, surrounded by a giant ice wall and covered by a dome firmament. Based on that premise, I decided that humans as we know them could be Atlanteans, who were known for their warlike behaviour and perhaps were exiled from being part of the bigger Earth and dropped down into a great ice hole filled with water, which then became the Atlantic Ocean. We then had to go about creating maps or atlases to navigate our way out, hence all the Operation High Jump, Deep Freeze and so on. And other planets they talk of visiting could be other craters within our crater, or just over their land masses rather than up there. But it is said that there are other lands beyond what we have been told, that there are maps within the international organisations that show these other lands and resources, and the mystery of the Antarctic Treaty is one that baffles many. I do believe the water and ice distribution has changed over time, and if the level has risen and fallen possibly too, we could have the wild variations we have on maps from throughout the centuries, which they laugh off as made up or wrong. I have another article along the theme about islands, so we'll go into it more in that one. An island, or was it? But the idea that the land masses we know of and the world we have been told is being questioned, and rightly so, as there have been many things they deceived people on and kept from them, so why not? Makes me think of the saying, the world just got smaller, and we think that it is to do with technology making everyone seem closer. Or was it? Could it have been when they shut off certain other areas, or relabelled them, changing names, locations, ideas, moving people around, changing the history and making it easy to eliminate from common knowledge that which you don't want people to know anymore? And the purpose is, touched on that slightly. But to me, it made sense when it came to borders, land, maps, ownership and slavery of people. All people, in varying degrees of it, from elite corporate slavery to the harsh and brutal conditions felt by some who were used for more manual and backbreaking tasks. If we knew there was more and better over there, wouldn't we try to find it? Wouldn't the curious, brave and adventurous amongst us be exploring that? Oh no, we can't, because we've been told it's all been discovered, nothing to see here. And if there is, they put up restriction, borders and barriers to keep us all in our fishbowl. Because a fish doesn't know there is a massive lake over there when he is in a tank, or know there is an ocean over there when he is in a lake. And while we are encouraged to focus on out there as a concept of space, again conveniently set up so that only the super rich, famous and connected get to do it, we aren't looking over there. And that's the purpose it serves in my mind, in my other article, Flat or Round. Looked at an age-old argument that has been resurrected about is it a globe Earth or flat Earth, and that is the case in point. Many people get stuck arguing about flat or round and want to be right so it becomes a battle. I prefer to look at what is gained from people thinking one or the other and what the possibilities are for both scenarios. So, we know they lie to people, they control people, and they dictate the information you receive and are taught to view the world with. So why is it so hard for some people to accept the idea that they could really have lied about that too? Because whether it is flat or round, your feet are still on the floor and it doesn't change your physical position at all. But it really does change how you think, or at least should. And then knowing that such a large pattern of lies could be constructed and enforced can also be shocking to people, so they can't or won't accept it. And that applies to many things, not just this debate, but anywhere where there is large-scale deception going on. But that's okay, because we have a couple of words to make sure we stop any of that nonsense dead in its tracks, haven't we? Conspiracy theorist. But I wonder how many people even look at the meaning of those words. Conspiracy. A secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. Theorist. Not yet proven. So I'm not really sure why some people think that it is a slur or an insult to throw those words at people, when clearly it means they have thought through what appears to be an unfolding plot. Maybe it's easier for people to accept who don't or can't think things through on certain subjects, if others don't either. Same with detectives, I guess. Sometimes they see a bit more than others, or can piece together what others didn't. So many TV shows and fictional characters portray this, and people love them. Not so much when it happens in real life though, it seems, unless it's for a cut and dry murder case, but someone revealing the whole setup to be a lie seems to be a hearty no thanks. An island, or was it? You may or may not be familiar with the so-called fictitious island known as Friesland. I'm not one for just going with what they say, so I like to do a bit of digging to see what it's all about. And this one I find interesting, because it is purported to be a completely made-up island. As so, Friesland, also called Friesland, Friesland, Frieslander, Frieslandia, or Fixland, is a phantom island that appeared on virtually all of the maps of the North Atlantic from the 1560s through the 1660s. So, for over 100 years, all sorts of cartographers from all over the place just happened to make up an island on every map. Sure, Jan. Convenient way to just erase a bit of the past though, isn't it? Oh, don't worry about that. They just made it up. Move along, nothing to see here. But we're not making it up. Here is one of the maps of the time, to give you an example of what there is to see. So we have very clearly all the other places we know exist today, with very detailed coastlines, names of places and mountain ranges, etc. But for some unexplained reason, not content with actual coastlines and land masses to chart and record, no, they just made them up out of the blue. Main question would be, why? And when everything else appears so accurate, even the little island looking bits along Norway's coast, if you zoom into those edges today, they appear as sandbanks. So why would I think they would just make it up? That's the bit that makes no sense. Unless you realise that there may have been land masses they didn't want anyone else to know about as time went on, or areas that would reveal too much. And like I said, the ocean may have also changed its route, course and coverage of the land, showing certain areas as perhaps Pangaea or Gondwana to show when the land was attached. But maybe it's always been attached, just underwater, with seasonal changes over a long period that they are now calling climate. Could in fact just be a cyclical cooling and warming of our dome, which makes the ice melt, causing potential catastrophe, but leads to a way out. Or it gets cold and freezes, meaning more land is revealed and we get to see a piece of what came before. Although we don't really, because certain institutions were formed to make sure they are the first ones called to anything of historic significance. They then take as long as they like, often under a veil of secrecy to investigate. Then sometimes years later we get a public-ready piece of information about said discovery. So much more is known than we have been told. But with the mysterious islands and various tales of other and different lands, is it so far-fetched to think there is more? And given how many lies have been told about history to suit the victor, I think it is correct to question that which came before, and that which we apparently see now. Because as we know, looks can be deceiving, and you can achieve an awful lot if people just believe unquestioningly something to be true. And they are discouraged from questioning, or looking, or wanting to see for themselves. If there is nothing to hide, then surely it makes no difference whatsoever if someone chooses to give it thought. Because sometimes one thought can lead to another, and curiosity, if present, should take it from there, and form ideas and further thoughts and questions. I am more than happy to accept that people just got it wrong, repeatedly, all over the world, for hundreds of years. But I am also equally happy to accept that it has been orchestrated to appear as such, moulding a very small and controllable world by way of maps, programming and repetition. It may well be that California was never an island and didn't have a very straight cut-off line, which now appears on current maps as the border between California and Oregon, despite first-hand accounts from people having sailed around it. And while doing their straight line, they clearly didn't notice the rest of the land, instead electing to show it as water. Silly people of the past can't even draw maps properly, or so we are told. Maps and islands. Further to previous articles about maps and islands, and island or was it, and Atlantis, no, that would be silly. I spent some more time looking through maps of the 1500s. One in particular is currently a favourite, which you may be familiar with, Urbano Monti 1587, and an earlier one too, the Mappa Mundi. But in between there are others, showing places that apparently were, but no longer are. Named, routed, and landmarks noted. But as far as we are told, they didn't exist and were just bits of fiction added, or they just got it wrong, which may well be the case. We know that just because it is drawn or written doesn't mean it is real. I noticed what looked to be an interesting feature on the 1587 map though, a spiral named as Virago. Naturally I looked up the word, with its meaning being put as an engulfing chasm, abyss. And it seemed awfully close to where we have magnetic north showing, a strange feature which looks as though the images aren't stitched together properly, so it appears fragmented and pixelated. Like what happens when you curve something that isn't supposed to be curved. But what do I know? And it can be seen as a diamond formation of dots on earlier maps. This one noted as 1380 in Roman numerals seems very different from the other maps of that time, being that the Mappa Mundi is apparently from 1300. And although it is speculated that most of these places noted above are in fact modern day Iceland, Greenland, Shetland Islands and the Orkneys, they say the others just simply don't exist. Although, when you look at Google Earth today, there are shapes within the area which could have once been islands perhaps, which leads back to a recurring question for me. If the water level has risen and fallen over time to reveal land once lost, or cover land we once knew, how could that possibly happen? Could the land tilt, rise or drop? Or is it the water levels that have changed, draining every now and then and creating land bridges and bigger continents for a time, only to be covered again by a deluge from above? As the old saying goes, the water's above and the water's below. Islands. You want to go to the island. The catchy conditioning line used in the film The Island 2005, making people think there is somewhere better to go and there is a purpose to your being and existence. Replace the island with heaven and I started to see a similarity of repeated conditioning of existence to think after is better than here. And while you are focusing on better there, you perhaps forget or lose sight of trying to make where you are now better. But back to islands for a moment, because it was actually another island that started this thought. It's from another film, but a certain real island, as far as we know, will tie in, because it's the film Castaway that came to mind, of Wilson and the bloody handprint, which gets linked to a conspiracy. But that particular premise surrounding that ball often gets mentioned as well as the actor. It's the location now that takes my thought, a tropical island, like the one currently linked to a certain news story that rumbles on. The delivery company and packages could also merely be coincidence too, seeing patterns where we want to and all that. But the next thought was cows. I know, seems a leap. But as in the first film mentioned, they were being cloned as replacement body parts, treated well until the point of necessity, just as people will treat prize cows or bulls, or any animal that is bred for what might be considered a superior purpose, even if that purpose is ultimately food or body parts. That film, My Sister's Keeper, I believe is about a spare child being born to provide body parts for the first sick child. Scale that idea up, I guess, And we end up coming back to a previously discussed idea in, perhaps, of those warehouses for the living dead, where people would be neomorphs, existing as living cadavers, waiting to be needed. Pleasure Island, Pinocchio. I have already mentioned this one too in my article, Being Real, of how it was used to entice children into servitude, with promises and temptation of fun and vices. But there is a price to pay, as it would seem there was for anyone who may have been invited to certain islands, where it seemed it was all fun and games, with no repercussions or penalty. But afterwards it is used as a weapon to buy your servitude, turning well-known people into donkeys, just as they did in the film to the eager and weak-minded youngsters, except they still looked like people, and no one noticed at first. But with strings now attached, having to perform their part, being pulled and played as required, with the direst consequences it turns out.